Oh, hello, friends. David Vos here. Very beautiful day in Oklahoma. It's gotten a little cloudy again. Temperatures aren't too bad. Um, really excited, friends. I'm so excited about the video that we're going to do today and the coming videos because this is going to take the rest of our lives to learn. But each and every one of these videos, I'm going to try and pack information into, because I've got some things I want to get to eventually. I mean, I've always said, if I were to just say a bunch of stuff that nobody understood, it wouldn't do any good. Christianity in the world, we've been lied to so much that we have so many prejudices. It's very difficult to get behind that prejudice to get get to a place where we can really teach, where we can get people to understand. I mean, the Apostle Paul had that problem. The original disciples, Jesus had that problem. Talking to the Pharisees, they had their beliefs, their religion. They called him a blasphemer. And so this is why when we hear knowledge that we don't understand, we condemn it. So it's I had that problem when I first started learning. I heard things that were true and I balked. Well, that's not what I was told. That's blasphemy. I can't listen to that. But yet I knew, I had to open my mind because I was closed and I wasn't getting anywhere and I was confused. So if the information that I had was confusing me, it wasn't truth. It was only lies. And that's why I was confused. So we have a Bible, and we've laid out pretty well the part about the old and the new, the left and the right, the male and the female, the negative and the positive. We've gone about it from purely scientific thought patterns, and we've looked at spiritual lessons that are taught in the parables and so forth. I want to get into a little more of that today. It's funny how when we're reading the Bible, we could be completely oblivious to so many other different things that we're reading. I find it to be so crazy that we can't understand the book that we're reading at all. That we would literally be worshiping the wrong God. And don't get me wrong, they've always done this. Abraham did this. Moses, evidently, was fooled a little bit by this. Because you see, it's not really describing what you would think. It's describing the actual process of being fooled in your Bible. I mean, the New Testament talks about the deception, how the devil goes forth to deceive the whole world. I don't think Christians realize that in the book of Revelation, it says they receive the mark of the beast. They don't read that verse very well because it says every man, woman, and child, both the small and the great, we've all been deceived. And what are we being deceived by? A big monster? A big 7-headed dragon? Yeah, but what is that? Well, you're being deceived by your own eyes. That's the monster. Your own ears. Your own desires. Your own body. The physical world. It's an illusion. And this paradox is right in your Bible. Remember we talked about the opposites. It's funny how in the land of Canaan, what we call Canaan today, because that's not really the land of Canaan. We've talked about that in some other videos. I hope we can get to more of that in this video. There are many lands of Canaan. There are many paradises, lands of promise. But you see, over thousands of years, all of these books have been lost and so forth, and different kingdoms and empires have come along. And the world empire in our day has incorporated this lesson that we're understanding and learning in this one book called the Bible, with 66 books. Everything is symbolic. 66 that's important. They made it that way on purpose. And they transferred all of this ancient wisdom to a little place called Canaan, or Palestine, some people call it, or which, that would be the Philistines, right? The Philistines. I don't know why we'd call it Palestine, because Christians think that the Philistines are supposed to be murdered, right? The Canaanites are bad guys. But we still call it that. And some people say, oh, it's the land of Israel. Well, because they conquered the Canaanites. But in that land, as we've said, that there's the lower side. And interestingly enough, the Dead Sea fits pretty good with that analogy. And that place is really the lowest place on the face of the earth. And of course, that would be a fitting place for the Lord to go, to descend and get baptized in the water, which is the Jordan, which is the lowest river on the earth, because it represents the fact that the Christ has to incarnate into the physical world, and there he's bound by the laws of this lower kingdom. But there's two kingdoms. Israel was broken into two kingdoms. Israel in the north, the 10 tribes, and the lower part, which is Judea. The Judeans had their own worship. They believed in the laws. They were warriors. It was a very terrible thing. Jesus came and he confronted them. He said, your father is the devil. He said, no, don't stone that woman. And it's all depicted there in the Gospels, but it's also depicted in the Old Testament. But there in the Gospels, as we have said, Jesus was from Galilee. That word gal in Hebrew means wheel. Remember when Joshua first came over, they crossed the Jordan. That's crossing through the water, the deep. When they got to the other side, they took 12 stones. That's the zodiac, and they set these up in a circle as a monument, and they called it Gilgal. That's the spinning wheel of rebirth, a wheel of rebirth, or a wheel of wheels. And of course, in order to do that, they had to bring down the walls of Jericho. Everything in here is symbolic. Well, same thing with Galilee. Remember, he made the circuit. Remember, the apostles were always making the circuit. And they would send the letters to the circuit. And the book of Revelation talks about these 7 cities. Well, Galilee also is from that word. It means the wheel. Jesus would go down to Jerusalem. And he said, it's not my time. Because you remember, the sun goes down at a particular time. Right? So, when his mother said, they have no wine, Jesus said, well, Mom, it's not my time. See, I can't be exposed yet. The sun doesn't come up yet. It's not time for the sun to come up, Ma. I can't do this because I'm the Christ. You want miracles, but you want life, living. You want to see some sunshine, but Mama, the sun doesn't come up until the morning. I'm not going down to Jerusalem. They're going to celebrate the Feast of Booths. They're going to hide in some tabernacles. And then they're going to have the Feast of Dedication, dedicate this temple. But he went down in secret. In other words, Christ is you can hear Jesus, even here in this carnal world, but he's not visible. Most people can't see him. He's sleeping in the boat. And so, that's why he kept saying these things that you read in John. It's like, why is it you do not know what I'm saying? Why is it you not believe me? Because you're of your father, the devil. You wish to do the desires of your father. The desires are those instinctual, carnal desires that come from the bottom, the gonads, the kingdom of Malkuth, which is at the bottom of the spine. And everything that you can imagine, whether it's science or the Bible or everything, it's all symbolic of all of this that we're talking about. There's the two gods. No, there's many gods, Elohim, like the Mount Olympus. There's the 12 gods of Olympus. Well, there's the 12 Elohim. So we've talked about a lot of this. What I want to talk about today is, there's so many things. I don't even know where to start, but let's just talk about how Abraham in the land of Canaan was dwelling in Beersheba. That's where Jacob starts off in like the Genesis. It talks about mostly in 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 in there. It's talking 20, 21. It's talking about Abraham a lot. Then it goes to Isaac for a few chapters. And then starting around 28, it starts talking about Jacob. Because it's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So when Isaac is old and Jacob starts being talked about, and they're talking about how Jacob needs to go get a wife. And he says, don't get a wife from the Canaanites, from this down here in this lower area. Now we're going to explain why that's so important. The wife, the wedding, right? Without the union between flesh and spirit and the harmony, there's no life. You don't want chaos. You don't want the carnal, wretched world with the laws of death and destruction. So it was a symbology, the whole thing. Jacob is, a lot of people don't know this, but Jacob is Yaakov. Yah is the god of the lower realm that we say. Yah, the moon god that the Egyptians worship, and the Canaanites, and also the people down in Judea, down there by the Dead Sea, which is that lower realm. They worship Yah with his 10 commandments, his vengeance and his wrath. And he wouldn't pardon your sins, and it was this lower realm. So, of course, Isaac didn't want his son, Jacob, to be unified with that realm. So he said, I want you to go way up north. I mean, we're talking way up north. Cross the river on the east side. That's where the sun comes up. I want you to go way up there to your ancient forefathers, from where your source is, to Haran, Padanaram. And I want you to get a wife there. So it starts off in Beersheba, where Jacob is living. That is way down at the bottom in the Dead Sea, near the Dead Sea. That's where he starts off. Yaakov. And he don't have a wife. And this is a continuous parable. I mean, we're going to start here for now, because before, there was all of this was going on with Isaac and Esau, right? Because Jacob's brother was Esau, and he got, Esau's realm was down there in the south too, on the east side of the river mostly, but more or less down, even more south than the Dead Sea. But that doesn't make him bad. We'll get to that here. But anyway, so he starts off with Beersheba, and he says, I'm going to go get me a wife, Dad and Mom. I know you don't want me to get one here. So he takes off, and he goes, and he finally comes to a place called Bethel. Well, all right, that's a little bit out of the realm of that lower area. He's going up. He's traveling north because he's trying to get a wife. He's trying to have a wedding. He's trying to have this. Remember, in the astrological wheel, we're going around the wheel. We're at the bottom of the wheel. We're going up. We're going to rise on the horizon. And it's going to be this beautiful day. And in the great wedding, we've talked about how Jesus was going to be gone on this long journey, and he's going to return for his bride. Those were the summer months. So he goes up on this Galilee, this wheel, and the center there in Gilgal, and the walls around it, Jericho, indicates that we're going to go sort of in a circle. And then after we've gone through the river and been baptized into this rebirth cycle, we've got to find a way to get out of it. We've got to find our wife. So we start off carnal, worshiping the God of this world with our egos. We get to a place where it says Jacob laid his head and determines, God makes a covenant with him. Now remember what we talked about. A lot of people have said, I don't understand the Bible because you say that the Old Testament God's bad and the New Testament God is good. One's above and one's below. And yet the entire Old Testament seems to be about Yahweh, right? So it's all bad, right? Well, then how come there's so many prophecies of Jesus? And like we talked about the other day, how Jesus seems to collaborate with Yahweh at times. Well, we got into that a little bit, how Jesus is on his right side because there's two gods. The top of the wheel, the bottom of the wheel, the left and the right. And so the Christ sits at the right hand of power. Well, Yahweh sits then at the left side. So he's at the bottom of the wheel. There's always these two opposites. And he waits for the lower side to destroy and maim and pillage and hurt one, and bring us into this, like a tutor. We learn by the things in which we suffer, until his enemies, which is darkness, is a stool for his foot. Because it's all about the higher being who is really who you are. Because the other lower being, as we said, taking it scientifically, is just the negative, which means nothing, the illusion. The material, which isn't really very material, it has no physicality. It's an illusion. It's a garment that we take on and put off. See? We're going to put on immortality. But the only way we can do that is to believe, to choose to do so. Okay? Unless we want to wander around in this illusion. So those are the two sides, the reality and the unreality, the top and the bottom. Even though darkness is not real, because you turn on the light and boop, it's gone. Where'd it go? Well, it just never was there. On the other hand, you couldn't even know that there was light without being able to distinguish it from the darkness. The positive and the negative both exist because they're both just concepts. It's like God, if you imagine God as an amazingly powerful being, he's all by himself, and how would he know himself? He'd have to make a mirror to see himself, right? It's the only way he could know himself. But if he saw his reflection, what would he be looking at? Oh, there I am. I know myself now. Not really. You're just looking at a reflection, an illusion. Well, that's what we're doing. The physical universe, time and space, is just the illusion, but it's the only way we can see ourselves. So we come down here and we live this illusion that seems to be very real in order to understand. So this is the process. This is what we're doing. We start off down in Beersheba. We get to this place where we begin to see stirrings of God. And it's the gate to God, Bethel, the house of El. Well, he's still Jacob. Later on, he's gonna get a little further down the road, and he's gonna become Israel. His name's gonna be changed. We're gonna be changed. This is the process. Well, then he goes from Bethel, and it says he crosses the river. And he goes up there to Laban's house in Haran, which is far, far north. And there he meets a woman named Rachel. And she's got some sheep, and she's a shepherdess. What is a shepherdess? What is a woman doing up there herding sheep in the north? Well, it's a little bit different than that area down there in the south, because down there in the south, women don't herd the sheep. They don't get an inheritance. They do what they're told. They wear a veil and they go home and they cook, right? But no, up there in the north, things are different. They're not under that lower system. And now we find a shepherd. Remember, the Lord's a shepherd. What's a shepherd? Somebody that knows how to guide the sheep. The sheep are the docile creatures that need to be guided, that need, they're very loving creatures. They're very good creatures. They're innocent, right? like led to the slaughter, like a lamb is led, just very willing. So that's the flesh, that the parts of the flesh that is innocent and is looking for direction. Well, the flesh has got to get direction from the higher law. Isn't that correct? If it's going to do it correctly. And so up in there, we're not talking about that male-dominated system. We're talking about our ancient past, something that is completely outside of the realm of the laws that we live under down here. And sure enough, this woman, Rachel, was very powerful. Because after Jacob gets done acquiring Rachel and Leah, remember there's two of these women, because there's going to be two sides. Later on, one of these women are going to produce several of the tribes of Israel that are kind of the lower nature. Remember, the Jews. And, there's 2 tribes, and then the 10 tribes are in the northern part. So there's going to be a split. It's all talked about in there. But Rachel, the beloved shepherdess, the one who's guiding the sheep, she is also the one who's got the water. She's the one dipping the water out. Eternal life. And so it's time to leave and go back down to the promised land. Now that we've acquired our wedding, now that we've had now that we've gotten spiritual, now that we've found our purpose in life and acquired our gods, well, we've saw God face to face. We're going to see, a little more about that. Because you got to know who you are. You got to have enlightenment to do anything down here in the physical realm. Doesn't mean we're not going to ever be in the physical realm, because the physical is great. We're going to live in the world. We're going to make it a paradise. The land of milk and honey. But you can't have a land of milk and honey without the balanced nature and without then spiritual powers and without having the inspiration of the God El Shaddai or El Elyon, the Most High. Not that Yahweh. So it's time to go bring his wives back down to the lower realm and build a kingdom, a foundation to build Jerusalem. Build his kingdom to receive the promises, the dew of heaven and the blessings of the earth. And as he starts to go, he gets scared, because the flesh sometimes does get scared of spiritual things and of that power, because, we're weak, we're fleshly. And so he takes off in the middle of the night, because he feels as though Laban's been ruthless with him, and it's been difficult to acquire this spiritual bride. It's been difficult. So he takes off in the middle of the night, and Laban wakes up and says, "Where's my daughters?" He takes all these, he earned all these camels and sheep. Of course, he's got the shepherdess with him. And he's like, "Well, I didn't even get to say goodbye to my children, Of course, he's been, treacherous with him all this. There's a reason why Jacob had to leave. But he takes off following him. He finally meets him down there near the Jordan River. It's a long, long, long trek. And he meets up with him and he says, "Don't you know," he says, "I've got power over you. I could take you out right now, Jacob. I'm from the higher realm. I'm much more powerful than you are." But he says, "God has told me not to do that. To do nothing good nor evil. Because there is no good nor evil in that realm. That realm is powerless to do good or evil. It simply does and acts based on what is good for the carnal nature. It gives only the spiritual, and it offers us the 2 brides. But he says, I noticed after you left that I'm missing my gods." "Oh boy, Dave, well, that must be some pagan gods. He's a pagan, right?" No, he's not a pagan. See, the lower kingdom is the pagan, although we're getting everything backwards, upside down, and backwards, because pagan just means of the nations. Gods that Israel or the lower kingdom in Judah, they didn't worship. But see, they only worship that Jesus calls the God beneath, the lower. Many of the nations were worshiping a God much higher. Remember Melchizedek, he met Molech, the righteous Molech, and, both Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, well, at least Abraham and Isaac met Father Molech, who was still alive and had the higher priesthood. Abimelech means Abi-Molech. And they both make covenants with that priesthood. But let's not get into that right now. But, this higher priesthood's all the way throughout the Bible. I mean, remember, Moses, his priesthood, he received it from Jethro, right? Who was a Midianite, who got his priesthood from Midian, which is the son of Keturah. So she got it from Abraham. Well, that means when Abraham had these 3 sons, sometimes we think that Jacob's the one son that's got the higher priesthood. No. Ishmael is the higher. There were 12 sons there too. They're twins, they're always these twins. Well, our story is going to follow the flesh. It's going to follow the lower nature and its learnings and journeys through the realms of the lower world. We're not concerned in the scriptures primarily about following the higher priesthood. It just mentions it is there all the time. And so Jethro notices that Moses cannot communicate with the lower realm. So he says, veil your face, let's put this down in some words that they can't understand, some parables. These guys want to worship the bestial nature. They want a priesthood. We'll make elders and priests, and we'll veil this whole thing. So Jethro's priesthood was higher. Remember Balaam? He was also a priest of Midian. And there were many that we encounter throughout this whole thing. So the entire system of this priesthood that we have really came from Jethro, which had a higher priesthood. And then they made sort of an appendage to the priesthood, which is the lower part. And we see this all the way through. I mean, Ishmael and Esau, they ended up marrying after, because it says Esau found out that his dad didn't want him. No, Abraham didn't want him marrying any of these Canaanites. So he said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm not going to go clear up there to Haran. That's a long ways. He already married 2 Canaanites. But he says, you know what? I guess I'll marry an Ishmael, a daughter of Ishmael. So they made a pact on Mount Seir, and they worshipped El. So this was, as you go throughout the Old Testament, you'll see all of this. It's all interwoven through there. It's really difficult to understand all this because we're still imagining that Yahweh's the true God and Israel's the, we're not realizing this is all a big parable. Jacob's still Jacob, and he's still making his way. So Laban says, yeah, you got my gods, don't you? So he searched everything, couldn't find it. Well, Rachel, she was pretty scared that she would lose. But remember, she's the shepherdess. She's that divine woman from the realms above. She's not under the law. She worships these other gods, and she ain't letting them go. Even if her husband's a little down there on the lower side. Remember the man and the woman, the male and the female, the negative, positive. Jacob's the lower side. He's from below. Rachel's from above. The female part. She's really in charge, see, and she's got the true God. So Laban's saying, man, oh man, these are gods from up here in Haran, up there in the north. They're very powerful, and I'm not sure you're ready for that, Jacob. I come down here to get my gods back. And Jacob doesn't know anything about it. Excuse me. Of course, he had nothing to do with it. He didn't even understand his wife at this juncture. He didn't even realize who she was. I mean, he saw her bringing the water out of the well and giving relief and comfort and nourishment to the sheep. And, Jethro also had a lot of sheep, and Moses became a herder of Jethro's sheep. See, the sheep represents all of us, all this carnal nature. And this carnal nature is looking for the water. The good shepherd was Christ. Or in this case, Jethro, or in this case, Rachel. So Rachel grabs these gods from her father's house, and she puts them under her dress, and she sits on them. And so they're searching everywhere in the closets and the horse saddles and everything, and they're looking for them, and they can't find it. And finally, Laban comes to Rachel, and she's sitting down. She says, "Oh, Father," she says, "I'd get up, but I'm having my period, like, what women always do. Pardon me if I don't get up and greet you." Of course, she didn't want to get up because she was sitting on the gods. So she took them with her, and she brought those gods down to this point. Where were they? Well, just before they crossed the Jordan River. It's called Gilead. Well, now this Gilead is a very important place. It means a pile of stones as a witness. Well, they piled these stones as a witness, Laban and Jacob. And here's what they said. Laban says to Jacob, he says, "This pile of stones is a witness between me and you, that I shall not cross over this place unto you, and you will not cross over this place unto me." Now, why would they say that? Because Jacob is taking his daughters down into the lower realms. He's going to cross the river. And Laban, where Jacob's wives are from, where these gods that they're bringing down into the lower realm, that's from the higher realm. Those are the higher gods. And this is going to give him a lot of blessings that he isn't even aware of right now. That's why he went up there to get his wife from that area. And Laban says, "I can do neither good nor bad to you, because God won't let me do anything. And so these are my daughters, and we're going to make a witness that this is the case." I mean, in our world today, you see, it's very difficult for anyone who is in this carnal realm to have any contact with that spiritual realm. If it weren't for the fact that Rachel had snuck those gods down, which, got very little prominence throughout the Old Testament. We don't hear about these gods. They're mentioned so that we know that the true God is something we don't know anything about. It's not what we're going to be learning about when we're going to be learning about Yahweh and all of his laws. That's not the true God. Those aren't the gods from over the other side on the eastern side of the river where the sun shines. Up there in the north where God sits. So they make this witness. The spiritual doesn't go any farther south. And the physical can't never go back into that spiritual. And so, you see these places in the Bible. And the Song of Solomon talks about this Gilead. Is how beautiful this place is. And his loving wife is from the north. And he sees this. He's making this beautiful song, and he says he sees this beautiful mountains of Gilead. Why is it so beautiful? Well, because he's coming down into the place of form and beauty. And he's got all these ambitions to live in the lower realm, and to, just like we're spiritual beings, but we live in this realm, this world, and we build houses, and we're very happy to build our houses and enjoy and have this adventure down here. So Laban's looking for his gods, and Rachel's got them. She's sitting on them, tucked up under her dress, and she says, "Forgive me, Father." He's looking for him. He's going through all the camel saddles and all the men's boxes and stuff that they're bringing on their horses and stuff, and camels, and can't find them. He says, "Who's got my gods?" Well, Rachel had them. She sat on them. She says, "Well, I'm having my period, and I'd get up, Father, but I'm kind of uncomfortable here, so forgive me if I don't stand up." Well, she's sitting on the gods from her father's house. So Laban takes off, goes back to his land, and Jacob takes off. And now remember, at this point, they're getting to this place where they're going to go down into this lower realm. Now, what's down there? Well, his brother Esau. Earlier, around the 28th, 27th chapters of Genesis, it talks about how, Esau was the firstborn, basically, should have received the blessings. But Jacob, pretty conniving little guy that he was, he stole the birthright. Of course, Esau was pretty angry, and he basically said, I'm going to kill my brother when I see him. Jacob was scared to death of him. So he knew that, Esau might be waiting for him. And he got a report that Esau was coming up with men, 400 men or something in armies and stuff, and he was really scared. So he separated his family into two groups. Probably Leah with one group and Rachel with another group. And he figured, well, if Esau comes along and attacks one group, maybe the other group can get away. And I will, at least be able to get out of here. And he mentions that in the 32nd and 33rd chapters there. He's saying something I crossed this river the first time with my staff, and now here I am, and I've been separated into two. So they take off, and he has this plan. He devises a plan. He's going to give these gifts to Esau, try to appease him. See, that you always got to appease that God down there in the lower realm, because he's ruthless and mean, and you're scared of him. Because it mentions the word fear there a couple of times throughout that chapter. He was just completely afraid. As most Christians today are afraid of their God, the God of the Old Testament, this God of vengeance. They're afraid they're going to go to hell. They're afraid they're going to get, punished or something. And this is the way Jacob felt. So he wanted to appease Esau. So he took off, and as he's going along, going towards the river, he sees this camp of angels. They call this Mahanaim, which means a place of a group of angels. He meets these angels. They come evidently to, we don't know. I said, what is this? What is this group of angels? He sends his wives and his whole, all of his children and everything, and his servants and his camels and his sheep. He sends them on, and they go across the river. Jacob stays back by himself. So he's all alone. And about the time they leave, this man appears, and they get into a big scuffle, and they start wrestling. Now they're wrestling in the night. It says they wrestled all night. It's very interesting. See, everything's symbolic. Everything's important. Every word. That's why you know this thing's inspired of God. Because everything you read, even though if you don't know what it means, you may think, well, this God's the devil. What's this God all about? I don't worship this God. Or some people say, there's contradictions. One place, it seems like he names this place called Bethel twice. Well, there's reasons. There's the Yahweh side and the God, and the other side from the perspective of El. There's the Elohist documents and manuscripts, and there's the Yahwist priests that wrote it down from two different perspectives. So people think, then there must be a contradiction, and they're just making this stuff up. And, the Jews have their version, and the northern tribes of Israel and the Samaritans, they have their version, and it's contradictory. No. It's not. It's done that way on purpose. It's a completely harmonious book. And you get the perspective from the lower side, from the carnal flesh, and you get the perspective of the higher spiritual side. So they're wrestling, and they wrestle all night long. And finally, the angel says, let me go. And Jacob says, I will not let you go until you bless me. Because, I'm scared, and I'm going down there into this world. And I've worked very hard to find my wife and to please my father. I'm scared of this God. I'm scared of Esau. There's a lot of things going on, and I want to have a good and bright future. I need you to bless me. Well, the angel touches his thigh, and it says he begins to limp. Jacob had a limp, or his legs were shriveled a little bit or something. This is talking about the lower nature, the legs. Jacob worshiped Yah, and he was strong in the flesh, and he had fought with God, and he had prevailed. And the only way he could get out of the grasp, I mean, look, there's the flesh and there's the spirit. The flesh, you see, is limping. The flesh is not going to be as valiant as the spiritual. So, but we, in the flesh, we have to be valiant. We have to conquer. It's very symbolic here. And so they called, it says, just as he received the blessing, the sun rose. Isn't that interesting? Because Jacob is in this battle, and in this, he's still Jacob. He's still in the flesh. He's still struggling in the night. And just as the sun rises, he sees God. And it's called pineal, which means pan or face, and el means the true God. So he sees the face of God, pineal. And that again is right there just before you cross the river. It's very symbolic. Because in the brain, there's a little organ that we call the pineal gland. It's more or less the gate, or it's the face of God, you might say. It's on the other side of the thalamus, the highest point in the brain, but right in the middle. And it actually is in the center of the brain, between the left side of the hemisphere of the brain and the right side of the hemisphere, the right hemisphere. It's right in the middle. So if you were going to cross over from the higher, the spiritual energies into these lower carnal nature, right in the middle, that would be the place. If you were fleshly and you wanted to see the face of God, you'd have to get right there in the middle. And that's that place that's in the middle of your brain, that if it is opened, if you are valiant, the pineal gland can receive that inspiration from God, and you can know God. And that knowledge goes through the third eye, which is the thalamus gland, and that opens up, and it gives all of the blessings to the rest of the lower nature, or the body, because the thalamus gland responds and triggers the pituitary gland to excrete all the hormones for the endocrine system. You know, the thyroid gland and all the other glands, the pancreas and the rest of your body, your hormones, we've talked about in some other videos, that are so important to our well-being and our happiness. So Jacob was blessed because he fought that fight, and he saw God, and he was able to receive those blessings. And it happens right there in the middle, right at the river, as you cross over. So there's a lot of symbolisms here. But interestingly enough, the pituitary then would be the male side of the brain. And the male side, see, it's the brute force. It's not that spiritual, higher female part that is represented there by Rachel. She's bringing down the gods from the northern part. Jacob stood in the middle and got that blessing and received those gods, wrestled with God himself. There's a scripture in the New Testament where Nathanael believed in Jesus, the Christ. And he says, I believe because I saw you standing under the fig tree. Well, there's a mention there of a tree in that story there in the Old Testament. And Jesus said, you believe because you saw me under the tree? Because you perceived me? You saw me? Now, what does it mean to see Christ? You know, a lot of people think, well, doesn't make any sense. Some guy saw Jesus under a fig tree and so he believed. What does that mean? It means he perceived and grasped who he was. He saw the face of God. And see, Jesus was the glory of God shining through the face. He was the logos, the expression of the Heavenly Father. No man can see God. He dwells in unapproachable light. It's an infinite reality that we're just all progressing for all eternity toward. But that inner spiritual Christ, or the inner spiritual light within you, if you can see that, if you can receive that inspiration, then you're seeing God in the face of Christ. And that's what that's talking about. Then Jesus said to him, oh, you believe, do you? Well, you know, henceforth you are going to see the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. And that's what happened to Jacob. He saw a ladder. He crossed over and he went down across the other side of the river, and he came to a place called Bethel. And he laid his head on a rock that he used for a pillow. Basically, it was, he says later on he sets it up as a pillar. But it was just a rock that he had laid his head upon. And he had a dream of a ladder that was upon the earth. And ascending the ladder was angels of God, up and down the ladder. This represents reincarnation. This represents that we come from the higher realms and we incarnate into the world. See, but we can't grasp it. We can't conceive of the spiritual realm. But the angels and the divine powers of God ascend and descend, and they get from the spiritual to the physical through that place called the pineal, where he saw the face of God. And then he crossed over and set up that pillar, which was the house of God at Bethel, which is where we worship God, the true God, in this house, in the upper realm. And so you see how the New Testament really just explains and expands on the Old Testament. And just because the Old Testament talks about Yahweh all the time, and people worshiping him, and the prophets of Yahweh and all of these things, it doesn't always mean that, certainly doesn't mean that would be the higher God. Jesus says he's from beneath. But unless you can rightly divide the word, you wouldn't understand any of this. Now, I want you to understand, just because we have a little place over there in the world called Canaan, or Israel today, that doesn't mean that's where the actual, well, there's a Jordan River over there. There's a Bethel over there. You know, you can look on the map and there it is, right? You can see Bethany. You can see Jerusalem on the map there. Gilead. You can see all these cities and towns. Bethlehem. They're all there on the map. And we got this story about Jesus coming to the Jews, and they were down there in this land, and he confronts them and talks to them. But is that really the correct place? Is that really Jerusalem? Is that really the Jordan River that the Bible's talking about? Probably remember that I've done a lot of different videos in the past, and so it's, you know, sometimes it's difficult. I can't just jump into some of this stuff because it would confuse so many people. But from time to time, I like to pull some of these things in together so that you can, maybe if you go back and see some of the other videos, and then you kind of forget about them and go into some others, and you think, oh, well, he's forgotten about that. Remember when he said that Jerusalem's not the real Jerusalem? Well, how could that be, Dave? Well, think about it. The land of Palestine today, which is the same area that it was in the days of Jesus, evidently, right? All the way from up there around where Dan was and around Mount Hermon, all the way down to the Negev. It's about the size of New Jersey, a little bigger than New Jersey, or like Massachusetts, right? And yet the Bible says that there were millions of Israelites in that land. Not only that, there were Philistines and 5 Axis kings. 5 kings, and they went out to battle with them. There were Canaanites and Hittites and Jebusites and Amorites and Amalekites. That's another point, the Melech. Yeah, Melech lived there. Abimelech, the father Melech, Molech, or with that priesthood of the Melech Zadok, or the righteous Molech. They lived in the land, and Abraham made a covenant with him. They both drank from the same well. And he said, I won't harm you, and you won't harm me. Well, there's all these covenants like Laban did with Jacob, about you go your way and I'll go mine. We'll meet in the middle, but we won't never be the twain, But, so you've got this land of Palestine, and everything seems to work very well, and you've got all these maps with the names and all these places. But that's not the real or the only Jerusalem there is on the earth, because, as we said, as above, so below, everything in the scripture is symbolic in so many multidimensional ways. You can, if the Bible was going to be a book written about who we are, it was going to have, as we said, it's going to have to be written about science. It's going to have to be written about history. And if history is being controlled and guided by God, then it's going to have some very interesting parallels no matter where you go in the world. Now, it appears that just about every culture has their own Jordan River that empties into one area, which is a low place. It starts in the top of the mountains in a high place. Everybody's got their Messiah, and everybody's got their river, and everybody's got their Jerusalem, or Uru, or Oro, or, something to do with light. Yaru is light. Salem is peace. And so words change slightly in different languages, but they all, we talked about how the Japanese have got their Mount Moriah. Well, if you go down there to South Africa, you'll find the same thing. There's a Jordan River. There's a Bethany, a Bethlehem. There's a Jerusalem. But remember, the Bible says that Jerusalem shall be desolate. They went in there. Rome went in and destroyed it and leveled it. And Jesus said, not one stone shall be left upon a stone. Scriptures in the Bible say that Jerusalem shall be inhabited by jackals and lions and bears and stuff. Have you ever thought about this? Jerusalem is so small, you couldn't get maybe, the Jerusalem today only got 860,000 people. It's a huge city. Yet the Jerusalem in those days were millions of people. And we can't find it. The archaeologists cannot find the walls of Solomon. We're supposed to be huge, megaton stones, and all of a sudden these stones are gone, right? They can't find them. Can't find Solomon's temple. In fact, the place where Solomon's temple is supposed to be, there's nothing there. Archaeologists have looked. The walls that are there today were built there the day that you see where the Wailing Wall and stuff is built in the 12th century, 13th century. They've never found any ancient walls. The mosque, that's recent. That comes from Islam. So what's going on? Well, the Bible says that Israel had, it said it has ostriches and leopards and lions and bears, crocodiles, behemoths. There are no behemoths in Israel. There are no lions. There might be a few lions, but the kind of lions that the Bible talks about, there's, if you read, you can look it up and they'll say, oh, well, the lions have gone extinct in the 12th century. Okay, yeah, that's convenient. That's kind of strange because America has had the same kind of animals here for 1,000 years. No, nothing's changed much. Not all of every animal gone, right? If you go to Israel today, they don't have any bears. They don't. In ancient times, they say they didn't even have sheep there, and yet the whole land's supposed to be a land of sheep, and right? Excuse me. They're supposedly sacrificing thousands of sheep on the Day of Atonement and Passover and all this sheep, but and yet there were no sheep. 1000 BC, 900, 500 BC. They say there were no sheep. It was a land of goats. They didn't have any sheep up there. And then the Bible says something about, remember, what was it? Samson. He got 400 foxes tied their tails together. Well, that's kind of weird because, foxes, they don't exist there. There's a lot of animals that they claim that the Bible says exist in this place. I mean, if you were trying to imagine where you could go, where you could find a lot of lions and bears, elephants, behemoths, hippos, crocodiles, the Leviathan, jackals. The Bible says there's jackals. All this stuff you'd find down there in Africa. If you look at a map today of Africa, it's going to be difficult to find all these names. But there are a lot of ancient maps, all the way back to around 1800. Now remember, according to the encyclopedia and all the dictionaries and all the wise men and everything in this world, they say the only white person that ever went to Africa wasn't until around 1840 or something like that. There weren't any, and no white person ever set foot. Now, I know there were some expeditions where they sailed around the Horn of Africa, and there were individuals that went to China, but this was all like during the Dark Ages, after Christ. There's Marco Polo, and there's Columbus, and they've got all these, individuals. Albuquerque, that's where Albuquerque, New Mexico, must be named after this guy from France that did some sailing and around the world. But the missionaries and the explorers didn't enter into Africa until around 1840 or 50. Yet we've got maps dated and printed in 1800 that has Jerusalem, a Jordan River, a Bethany, a Bethlehem, and all of these different places. I mean, on and on and on. Hebron, Canaan land is down there. Calls it Canaan land. Now, a lot of people will say, well, those names must have been given by the missionaries when they went in there. But as we said, there are maps with all these names even before missionaries ever went there. There was a guy that did an expedition. In 1900 and something. And then there was other people that have gone since then, even recently, to go find that they're supposed to be this lost city down there in South Africa. And this lost city, this guy saw it and wrote about it. It had these huge stones. The walls were 40 feet high, and it was this magnificent city that with all the bricks were falling over and not one stone's on a stone, basically. Just the outline of what appeared to be an ancient wall. He called it, looked like the Wall of China. It was so huge. Remember, the Temple of Solomon was supposed to be so great that all the world and the Queen of Sheba came and marveled and they had, it was the most amazing thing in the world. The Bible's writing about it. And the greatest prophets that ever lived were buried in this, little tomb that nobody can even find, right? Nobody can find the tomb of Abraham or anything like that. There's a lot of people that say, oh, we found the tomb of David or something like that. But people are speculating. Nobody can find the Ark of the Covenant. Nobody can find the temple. Nobody can really find or prove that anything in Israel even belongs to anything. They can't find the city of Nazareth. Well, there's a city of Nazareth actually down in the southern Africa. South Africa. There's a city of Nazareth. And all these places are all right around the same area, right around a place called Jerusalem. Well, if you go to that place in Jerusalem, down there in South Africa, it's completely desolate. It's illegal to actually go in there. They've got like park rangers running around and trying to stop. If you try to go snooping around down there, they won't let you in. There's no road to it. But I don't know if I'll be able to put them on here, but I've got some pictures of some of this supposed city that actually pictures of it that you can go and look at to this day. Huge stones. In a place which is a desert where jackals live. You know, right? Exactly what the Bible says. It shall be a dwelling of jackals. And it's right where the map that we have that's dated 1800 says Jerusalem was. And yet today there's nothing there. Except the stories of the ancient lost city that was one of the greatest wonders of the world, but doesn't exist there anymore. And when you go to the people down there, there's a group of individuals that live down there that are not even considered to be Negroid. They're not considered to be Africans. But they say that the people who built these ancient ruins were the ancient ones. And there's pictures on the carvings and and pictures on the stones that show African peoples as the original people who built these stones. There's a place called Ophir. You heard in the Bible the gold of Ophir? Well, that area down there in South Africa called Ophir is where it's known that there are many gold mines all over the place. And there's a lot that's been, investigated on that particular line. That would be for another video. But I've done other videos where I've explained how when the gods originally came to this planet, they came from the Milky Way, from the Jordan, right? They incarnated into the Milky Way, into the stars, into the zodiac, right? The 12 constellations, and there are the 12 tribes. And it says they came to a place and built Eden, the Garden of Eden. And there was 4 rivers. There was a river that emptied, that went out of Eden, and it had 4 branches. Now it's interesting because if that river, remember Jordan, there's a river in the sky called Eridanus. That's just Greek for Jordan. Jordanus. That's a word that they use for that Milky Way. And so I've talked about in past videos how the galaxy has, the center of the galaxy is a big ball of light, and then there's these 4 spiraling arms that come out from it. There's 4 rivers. As above, so below. Everything's of the same pattern. This is where we all came from. Our that spiritual third heaven, which is in the cranium, which is up there in Haran, which is up in the north, that where we get our wife Rachel, brings down the gods from above, and all the spiritual blessings that we receive from it. We come down into this lower realm, and the water and the river issues out of Eden. Well, on the earth, we have an area called the tropics, which is between Cancer and Capricorn. Remember, Capricorn is the bottom of the wheel of astrology. Cancer is the top of the wheel. So, when the sun goes around and around the earth, in the summertime, it goes into the northern hemisphere. That's why there's summer in the northern hemisphere. It's because the sun's getting closer in the summer months up here. And then in the winter, it seems to go down, and then there's summer in Australia or Brazil. Well, when it goes all the way to the bottom, it reaches this Tropic of Capricorn. That's in the bottom, and there's summer down there in the bottom part of the wheel, but there's winter up here. When it goes all the way to the top, you go to the Tropic of Cancer. So in that tropical area, that would be considered the path of the sun. And that's also when it gets dark outside and you look up into the sky. If you get a place where it's really dark and you can see the stars, you can see this big swirl. This looks like a river. We call the Milky Way. It's where we're looking right into the disk of the Milky Way. So that right in the middle, or called the Equator, that would be considered the Milky Way or the Jordan River, or the one coming out from the center of the galaxy, that river that comes out. And then there are going to be 4 rivers branching off of it. What would that be? Well, I've gone through this in other videos, but right now the Equator, because, we're at 23.5 degrees at an angle. The Earth has a tilt on its axis, 23.5 degrees, 23.5 degrees. So it has changed from ancient times because there's a wobble, and over a period of, thousands of years, the Earth changes and it tilts on its axis just a little bit. So where the Equator would be now, it was different thousands of years ago. At this time, if you go to the Equator, it's down there in Bolivia or something. But, there was a time when it was all the way where our 30th parallel is. And that would have been, at one time, that would have been the Equator. The 30th parallel is where the Nile River empties into the ocean, or to the Great Sea, or the Mediterranean Sea. And there are several huge rivers and big civilizations that all have these huge rivers that empty into this 30th parallel all over the world. You've got the Ganges River and the Ganges River in China. You've got the Euphrates and the Tigris that both empty into the 30th parallel. The Egyptian River of the Nile. The head of the Nile is way down in southern Africa. And that would have been considered the Eden for them, that empties into that central river that comes out of the garden. So wherever you are in the world, they brought their cultures and they used their river as, and so there would be these several major cultures that would, as above, so below. They'd have this symbology. They would say, okay, this is the Garden of Eden. This is our city, Jerusalem. This is the northern part. Represents the lower nature. So you can take all the pyramids on the Nile River and get them to harmonize with all the information that you've got there that we're doing now with the land of Canaan. So there could be a Jerusalem in Canaan and yet another Jerusalem in South Africa, or another Jerusalem in Egypt, or another one in India, or in Babylon on the Euphrates, or yes, even the Hopi Indians there in Arizona, where the Colorado empties into the little area like Mexicali, right around there, which is the 30th parallel. And then there's the Mississippi, which enters into a place called Orleans. That's the light. And it empties at the 30th parallel there in Mississippi, in the Gulf. So we've got 2 of these rivers, if not more, because you've got you've also got the Rio Grande, which follows along the Mexico-Texas border and empties out into the Gulf. And all of these great rivers have these great cultures. So where it empties out means that the head of the river goes into the north somewhere that they don't know. That's the higher realms. So it's all very symbolic, and each of these cultures have their own little places, and they all have their symbols. So what we're looking at, there's a lot of this. I explain all this and mention all this because a lot of people are very confused because they're looking at South Africa, and this is a big movement kind of going amongst the African peoples and African Americans that are studying all of this, and they're beginning to realize that, wow, maybe the African peoples are Israel. Well, as I've explained in many of my videos, the 12 tribes is all the world. And the 72 souls came out of the loins of Jacob. And Judah shall be, the scepter shall not depart from Judah. And so the royal bloodlines went into all the earth, whether you're from South Africa or Europe or China. There's a Mount Moriah in Japan. There's a Mount Moriah in South Africa. Look on the map. Some of the modern maps, it's not there. But if you go back to the ancient maps, it was there. And it was there long before the missionaries ever went there. And it's definitely a place of jackals and ostriches and behemoths and lions. And there's definitely a lost city that you can see to this day, the stones, in a place that is desolate. So it doesn't matter your culture. In India, they have the same thing. The Hopi Indians have the same thing. Joseph Smith was a prophet. I've talked about him many times, and he says that the Garden of Eden was in America. Well, see, the Garden of Eden is not anywhere. It's in heaven. It's in the third heaven. It's in the top of your cranium, where the light is, the higher hemisphere. But in every culture, they have their Garden of Eden. And so this is what the Bible is talking about. You have to be able to look at all these symbols. So we're trying to understand what the Old Testament's about, what the New Testament's about. The old God and the new God. The flesh and the spirit. And as we do that, we begin to see that the symbolisms, as above, so below, not only is it describing the universe, how everything was made, the whole galaxy, solar systems, 7 planets and the 7-headed dragon, right? Tiamat, that Sitchin talks about. But it also is a collision, like Velinkowski says, worlds in collision, right in our own body. It's a struggle within our own soul. And we have the higher and the lower nature right here in our own body. There's the macrocosm and the microcosm. So when you're reading the Old Testament, you're reading the blueprint for your own body. You're going to find out what you need to be happy and blessed. And it's going to be the same in your body as it is in the world. What's good for you is good for the whole world. And what's good for the world is good for the entire universe. So you're going to be able to study the Bible as if it was a scientific, biological treatise or an astrological book or a history book. And it's all true. Jacob becomes Israel. We become transformed. We become spiritual. So many beautiful things that we can learn from the Old Testament. We've got to understand what this book is. So that's what I'm trying to do, is explain this journey here from Beersheba to Haran, across the Jordan River, down to the place called Pineal, where he saw the face of God, and then to Bethel, the gate of God. and why these two places exist and what they mean. It's not about, it really isn't really too important whether it was in the land of Canaan or in South Africa or in Arizona. But what is interesting, to me, I find it to be absolutely amazing. I would love, if there's anybody out there, obviously I wouldn't have the money to be able to go, but it would be the most amazing thing in the world if some of us could just get the money together, go over there. I mean, it's literally illegal to go explore these ancient ruins. There's a little park that they have where you can go in and look at the park, but you got to stay on the pathway, right? You start going out on the other area and start investigating where this ancient lost city was, they'll arrest you. And this is true of there in New Mexico and Arizona. I've told you guys how I've explored. There is literally an area. It's actually in the Book of Mormon. It describes this place called Jerusalem that existed right here in America. There was Joseph Smith was walking along. He was coming from New York. That's where he started off, and they started going towards the west. And they got to Nauvoo, Illinois, on the banks of the river. And as he stood on the banks of the river, which is right about where Iowa is, and that river comes down and goes through St. Louis. Well, as he stood on the banks of the river, he said, across the river was a place called Zarahemla. And he talked about how there was another city that would be called, what was it called? Well, I can't even think of what he called it. Something like, started with an M. Anyways, a huge city. He described it. And I've showed pictures of it. It's just right outside of Jerusalem, St. Louis. There's a big pyramid about the size of the one in Egypt. But our government doesn't tell us anything about it. We have no idea. There's a little place you can park along the road and take pictures. But I guess nobody seems to be too interested. Well, there were the early settlers that came through America talked about finding quite a few of these ancient, it was a huge civilization that was here along the Mississippi River. Right around the 1500s is when they don't know what happened to them. They were just all gone. You can imagine when Columbus came over right around 1492, brought all of his ships, I'm sure after the first 3 boats came over, there was a bunch more to follow. And after that, it seems like all the those civilized people living in all those great civilized cities and along the river, they just disappeared. Nobody knows what happened to them. Same thing happened in southern Africa. The missionaries went in around 1840, and Great Britain, conquered South Africa, and they seemed to be only interested in the areas right around Jerusalem. That whole South African, right around Johannesburg, and going north up through Lake Victoria, which is the head of the Nile, and all the way to Egypt. They conquered about half of Africa, but only along that great Nile and all the way down to South Africa and Johannesburg and that area there. And then other countries came in later, and missionaries from Germany and the Dutch and different places in France. The Portuguese did a lot of exploration. But the crown was very interested in Jerusalem. The little town called Jerusalem there on the map in Africa. They built these cities. Well, not cities, but they built these churches right at these particular locations where all these names are that we talked about, Bethany and Bethlehem and Jerusalem. They built these churches. And at that point, it seems like most of the people that knew anything about all that stuff just disappeared. They started erasing the names, making new maps. They created a government in South Africa, apartheid and all of this stuff. And now it seems like there's these amazing little parks run by the government that are around these holy sites that you can't go in anymore. But you might find it interesting to know that the same thing has happened here in America. And I actually broke into one of them. I mean, I talked about this in one of my videos. A couple of my videos I talk about this. There's a place in New Mexico, and this is well documented, but in ancient times there was a guy that found in southern New Mexico, he found there was a little mountain, looked kind of like a pyramid, and under the base of that mountain there was a cave, and he went down into it, and he found what he described to be gold everywhere, and artifacts and ancient Hebrew writing. There was Hebrew writing all over. I mean, I've documented that in California. The Ishi, the last Indian in California, his name was Ishi. That's Hebrew for man. I don't get time to get into that story, but there's Hebrew writing all the way from California up through the Colorado on the Purgatory River. It goes all the way along down through the Colorado and down through the Rio Grande, down through New Mexico, through Albuquerque, down to El Paso. And that along that Rio Grande, there's a little mountain range there, and there's several mountains that look a little bit like pyramids. One of which I've explored that happens to be behind an 8-foot fence with barbed wire on the top so that you can't get in, with signs posted every so many feet saying, "Do not cross this, $5,000 fine and 5 years in prison if you're caught." Well, I made my way in there. There is and I've even got pictures of this on some of my videos. You can look on the internet. There's some other people that have taken pictures of it. I went in there and I saw that there was some ruins there. There's an altar with the name of Yahweh written on the altar in paleographic Hebrew. And these Hebrew letters are found throughout all of, even the ones that are in Mississippi. Paleographic Hebrew, the Phoenicians sometimes they call them. Paleo script that's written all over the world. It's funny how you go to South Africa and you look at these names, they're written in English, right? You know, from the Hebrew. The same words that we know today to be Hebrew words. And that's the name of the town, Jerusalem, in Africa. And maps printed in 1800 with the name Jerusalem on it. And there wasn't any white man ever seen Africa until 1840 or 50. I think it was 1849, the first white man ever set foot in Africa. So, this can't be some conspiracy. This is real. All over the world, 12 tribes have gone, and they've set up their civilizations. And all the ancient, the Anasazi here in America, the ancient ones, they built their great pyramids and their cities and civilizations always along these rivers. Whether it be the Colorado or the Rio Grande or the Mississippi or the Ganges River or the Indus River or whatever it may be. It always empties into the 30th parallel. And there's always a city of light. And every one of these cultures have the same beliefs. And they all have the same knowledge of the gods, the 12 gods, and the higher and the lower. And they all have their Christ. And you can read in the Popol Vuh about Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, who came to them and taught them love and goodness, and left and went to the east to his father, and said he would return again. Every culture has this. And the prophet Joseph Smith said that Quetzalcoatl was Jesus Christ. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever, and he loves all of his children. And he had other sheep which were not of that fold there in Jerusalem. And they too he will gather. And there shall be one fold and one shepherd. And he will make a new covenant of peace, as it says in Ezekiel 34. And there will be no more death, and the lion shall eat straw like the bull. There's so much more that we could cover about all of this. And it's difficult to even spit it out of my mouth, really. And I hope I was able to explain it fairly well. So that's kind of an overview of some of the things I want to start talking about. Because it has to do with diet, as we've been saying. It has to do with what we're going to eat, the 12 cranial nerves, the plants, the trees of life. But we can't understand that, how it's going to somehow give us eternal life unless we understand the body and that carnal nature and the God that dwells down there in the lower instinctual nature at the base of the spine, in the Dead Sea, that stagnant pool that's got to be reborn and restored, as it says in Ezekiel 34. And the fish have got to come up through the river and multiply. And Christ is that one who goes out and, as a fisherman, he becomes a fisher of men. It's a beautiful story, but we've got to crack all of these symbols from every culture, from all the scriptures, because all scripture is inspired of God and beneficial for teaching and for reproving and for setting matters straight. So I'm going to go ahead and go, friends. I hope you guys have a really great day. We'll get into this even deeper in the coming videos. We'll see you again tomorrow.